16 million colors. Wreak some havoc in your head.
Welcome to TitanCast, your home for Sega Saturn news, commentary, personal stories, and more. My name's Samuel, the Southern Sega gentleman. With me today, we have the man from Manchester, Father K, or Simon if you will, our West Coast correspondent, the VirtuaSchlub, Brian, and lastly, the elusive NebachadnezzaR, Nuno. So, before we get off into the topic at hand, let's discuss some news first, and seeing how we've had a little bit of new information come out through proper channels at this point, and it hadn't hit the shelf yet whenever we did our last podcast. You know, we have the Retrobit controllers coming out, the controllers themselves and the cables. I wanted to see what everybody's thoughts was concerning, you know, all the different variations we have to work with.
Well, I think these are just awesome. I mean, I actually wrote not too long ago. It was my first contribution to the blog since the, let's say, return of the Saturn Junkyard. It was an article about Saturn-style USB controllers for the PC. And not too long after I write that, they announced new Saturn-style USB controllers, except that these ones also work for there are also controllers for the actual Saturn, I think, but are they just USB for the PC? Actually, now I'm getting confused. Well, anyway, the USB ones are great, and Bluetooth too. And the Bluetooth ones are in the style of the old infrared controllers, which I think is a nice touch. And overall, I think it's just amazing. I certainly want to get one.
Yeah, I'll second that. I'm hugely excited by the prospect of new controllers. I'd always wanted some of the infrared Saturn controllers, and I'd always wanted a wireless Dreamcast controller too. And the fact that you'll be able to buy them new out of the box is extremely exciting to me. And the fact that Sega are doing something other than pushing software onto mobile phones is hugely exciting to me. So yeah, I'm knocked out by it.
Yeah, with me at least, I'm really into the whole not the Bluetooth per se, but the ability to have, you know, a controller away from it. You know, I don't have to worry about the cables. I got a little daughter that runs around. So having the ability to actually have something with a Bluetooth controller to have that wireless effect, that's going to be absolutely awesome. Not to mention the variations we have. The one thing I'm just kind of worried about is quality control. I know whenever it came to the controller that Nuno had gone over for the very first video for the YouTube channel, there was the Play Sega controller. There was a little bit of discrepancy in, you know, the D-pad control, the triggers and everything. And I'm really hoping that it stays true and Sega actually does some good marketing at least and some good feedback and QC so that we actually get something that's really close to original.
Yeah, I'm at least encouraged by at least the sense that Sega is willing to make other partnerships that aren't with AtGames. That is, you know, at least could bode fairly well for the quality. I mean, I think Retrobit, there's, you know, their track record isn't perfect, but overall, you know, I think they've had enough hits to instill a fair amount of enthusiasm and confidence in what these will be. And I also threw up a question with the community regarding this a little while back. And so the question was, it's a survey question. The dust has settled from last week's reveal of the Retrobit line of Saturn controllers. So now the question is, which one will you buy first? And so I have a few responses here. I think the top response was just one. Screw that, I'm buying them all right away. I think that's maybe the obvious answer in hindsight. And then the second most popular was the black pad with the black buttons. Although that may be a little biased because I didn't really differentiate between the Wi-Fi or the wireless one or the USB one or the just, you know, either version. And I think the black pad was the only one that they showed the wireless version of, so maybe that had an impact, but I assume that maybe they would all be available in all colors. The third most popular response was no thanks, I have enough Saturn controllers. And then the white pad, the gray pad, each got a couple of votes. And then a couple people also said, I'll wait till they make a 3D analog pad.
Good deal, folks. Another thing we have going on in the community right now is we have the thumbnail competition that is soon to be ending. In fact, by the time this recording actually comes out, it will most likely be ended, and we'll be working on trying to figure out who the winner is. So Simon, you want to chime us in on that a little bit?
Yep, we've had a competition running for quite some time now to design a celebration of what was 11 years of this Saturn Junkyard. We're now into the sort of 12th year because we're hitting that 2018. But back in 2017, we set a competition for people to design a graphic for the main blog site, and saying that it was celebrating the 11 years that the blog site has been running. So that was the competition. What was up for winning was first prize is a 3D Japanese Saturn controller, white with the coloured buttons, very, very nice. The second prize, some custom-made Police Notes packaging, courtesy of Ben Boyd, which is absolutely superb. We've also got an original official Sega Saturn magazine, which is the third prize, and then the fourth prize is a mystery Saturn game, which hasn't quite been decided yet. And of course, all entrants get the most wonderful Club Saturn CD. So yeah, we've had double figures in terms of the entrants, about 10, I think, overall, which is a little less than I'd expected, but it means that there's more chance of those people winning, which is great for them. So yeah, I've got to find somebody now to judge the competition. It has to be someone, obviously, who doesn't know the people who's entered, because we don't want it to be biased in any way. So we're going to get someone who is familiar with the Sega Saturn, but is from without of our community, and someone who has a good eye for graphic design. We're going to get them to judge the competition. It's not going to be me or any other members of the Junkyard team. So yeah, that's the way it's going to go. And I'm really looking forward to showing off the entrants, because at this point in time, there's only me who's seen them. I've kept them in a special vault here at Krishna Towers in Manchester. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to showing them off, because they are very, very excellent quality and standard. And we're going to be looking forward to putting them up on the website. So yeah, that's all good.
Should we take bets on how many winners there will be?
Oh Lord.
I mean, they could all be good, you know.
There can only be one, man. There can only be one.
Or two.
Oh God. Another thing going down is we always have a weekly competition over in the yard. If you're a listener and you're not a member of the Saturn Junkyard on Facebook, we do a lot of stuff. We got live streams we'll be talking about later on. We also have we have a weekly competition, and there's no prizes. It's just for bragging rights, et cetera, et cetera. But the very first challenge we ever did was concerning what was it? Man, my brain
Sega Rally?
Yeah, Sega Rally. My brain just went crazy. By the way, I don't really like arcade racers, so that's probably the reason. But, Father K, tell us a little bit about what we got going on this week.
Okay, so we just had to let go of the Virtua Racing Challenge, which really, it kind of turned into a personal three-way battle between our own VirtuaSchlub, Brian Bynes, David Lee and Dean Burgess, and the three of these guys were battling it out, shaving seconds off lap times, and it got really serious, and it got quite exciting actually watching them post their times and seeing each one knock each other off the top spot. So we left Virtua Racing behind, and I had the stupid idea of setting a golf challenge this week on the Saturn Junkyard Facebook page. So I decided to set a golf challenge with Pebble Beach Golf Links, which is the Craig Stadler infused golf game on the Saturn. And everyone that had played it and everyone that signalled their desire to join in the competition sort of had fond memories of the game. And yet, when we came to play it, it's one of the most difficult sports games I've ever had to play. And it can make you curse really, really badly because, well, anyway, if you want to find out more about why that particular challenge wasn't successful and why that particular game is tricky, there's a new post over on the Saturn Junkyard blog. So check out www.saturnjunkyard.com and you'll be able to see why it's golf hell. But yeah, so that was the last competition. There was only me, Brian, and I think one more guy who actually had the tenacity to stick it out and finish 18 holes. It was fairly grueling. I did it for a few days, and it's not an experience I'll care to repeat for some time.
Yeah, I think that was like the hardest part, was just because, you know, to get through all 18 holes, this isn't like you can just, you know, do a quick race and you can put up a score within a few minutes. Like this one, you know, it took me like an hour and a half to get through the whole course, I think. But otherwise, I don't know. I thought it wasn't a bad game. Like, it eventually grew on me, especially as I got past the learning curve a bit. But one of the issues I had was, I think I'm just so spoiled by modern amenities of like the Everybody's Golf games or the modern Hot Shot series or whatever they're calling it these days. And so, like, you know, you don't really have ball trails or a camera that follows the ball, or, you know, you don't have like a lot of markers for like how hard you have to hit the ball to get near the hole. And so it's like you just have to gauge so much manually, and it's easy to mess stuff up. And also, it like the wind is always constantly like 25 miles an hour. So, that kind of contributed a little bit to the challenge of this challenge.
And I mean, I never chimed in on the actual golf. I was way too busy doing a couple of other things. But one of those things being, we have a live stream we're actually doing now. This is part of our giving back to the community mindset. We like to engage y'all. We like to give y'all something back. So what we started this will be our 4th week going at this point. We have our Sunday Fun Day Let's Play. And that's where you get to join me, the Southern Sega Gentleman, and whoever I finagle to come join me for an hour. And basically it's at 3 p.m. Central U.S. time. That works out to be 9 p.m. UK time. I'm sorry, European folks. But basically, we let the community jump on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, voting who they want to play. I mean, what games they want to play. And then y'all get to subjugate me to whatever good game y'all pick or whatever bad game y'all pick. And if it was up to Murder of Crows K from the Saturn, from the Shiro guys, I would have been playing Crow, the horrible Crow game. And I'm very happy that the Saturn community didn't want to put me through that hellacious time. In fact, I'll be playing Panzer Dragoons Y here in about 2 hours. More than likely have Brian and a couple of other people be sitting in with me, and we'll be discussing things. And if you're just now hearing about the live stream and you want to be a part of it, like I said, you can find it on Facebook. Well, we normally stream it through the actual Saturn Junkyard's page. You can type in Saturn Junkyard, the Saturn Junkyard, and you can find our page along with the Facebook group if you haven't found it. And we share it around, dude. It's all over the place. Also, we'll post it up the next day on the YouTube channel. So if anybody who missed it wants to, you know, get a little bit of entertainment, sit back for an hour and just watch some dude from Louisiana start beating his head against the wall because he can't figure out how to get through something. There you go. It's always a fun time. But other than that, we also have a little bit of news coming out. It's been talked about for a little while, but we have some North American Longbot cases being reproduced by, I don't know if it's being reproduced by Limited Run Games, but members of the Limited Run community or the group that does that are actually producing them. Any of y'all boys from Europe have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, just the simple fact that right now there are so many new products coming out about the Saturn. I mean, it's the controllers, now it's the boxes too. It's just at the same time that the Saturn Junkyard came back, it's like the whole Saturn scene is coming back. I don't know what kind of weird coincidence is this, but it's just mind-blowing, I think. A console that got forgotten for and ignored for so long, and now it's making such a big comeback. It's amazing. And the fact that they even had the idea that maybe some people out there want these boxes for whatever reason. Maybe it's to do repros, either for guys that do that like in a commercial basis or people who do that at home. As I mentioned in the MegaCast, when I was younger, I always did some kind of reproductions for myself. Like I would just find a picture of the cover of the game online and print it out. And for games that came in regular boxes, like a CD jewel case, like the regular jewel cases, it's fine, it's easy to get those. But for games that came in consoles which had particular boxes, like the Saturn, like the Dreamcast in Europe, like the PlayStation in Europe actually also had. They seemed like jewel cases, but they weren't. They were thicker. You couldn't get replacement cases. You either found some a sports game that was cheap and available, and you threw the game out, which I'm completely against, by the way. I hate people. I hate that practice. I'm not going to judge anybody, but I don't like the practice of like destroying all games, no matter how abundant and crap they seem. I think they're limited and they have a place in here. And I don't like the idea of destroying older games. So the fact that these guys are coming out with new boxes, I think it's amazing. It's just amazing. And the only thing that makes me sad is that it's just the American-style boxes and not the European ones, because I would love to get me some new European-style Saturn boxes.
Yeah, I'll second everything Nuno's just said there. I guess that if the long boxes from the US sell well, someone's going to be watching and someone's going to be thinking that they're going to do the same for the PAL boxes. I've only got one American game, which is Area 51, the light gun game. So it's not something that's going to affect me directly, but I'm, as Nuno said, just thrilled to see more Saturn stuff coming back.
And you know, as anybody who's listened to the podcast probably knows at this point, I have got a mountain of disc-only Saturn games. I went the cheap route, trying to save a little bit of money. I was absolutely enthralled whenever I heard about this. That might not be the right word, regardless. But I finally had the ability to do some kind of, and I am not in any way against reproductions. I think reproductions serve a massive place in the community. We were actually talking about this on a couple of threads on Facebook the other night. But right now I have a number of games in DVD cases and white DVD cases. They halfway look like Wii games, but they all have custom artwork. None of them have manuals, though. I mean, a few of them have manuals, but the manuals are too big to go up in the DVD case anyway. Now I actually have the ability to, of course, my wife's probably going to hate me because I'm probably going to spend $100-something on cases right off the bat. But I have the actual ability to showcase these games like they were originally meant to be showcased. And not to mention that, but they're no worry about, 20-year-old plastic and the hinges breaking on me. I mean, granted, if it's the exact same proprietary everything, we're probably looking at brittle cases still, but at least we have the opportunity to have them in their prime and take care of them a lot better than, say, me whenever I was 7-8 years old first getting off into the Saturn. Because I can promise you, there's a lot of cases and a lot of games I messed up just from not understanding how to take care of something whenever I was in my youth and my adolescence.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add to that. I mean, I'm also pretty excited at the prospect of being able to replace some of the broken cases that have amassed over the years. But the other thing I would say, though, is I hope that they do take it a step further, because what I would love to see is some Dreamcast PAL cases, maybe with better quality hinges or something that they don't break as easily, because I think visually those look really awesome, and I'd love to put some custom art in some of those and transfer over some of my American discs into those PAL style cases at some point. If Limited Run is listening, that would be awesome.
Most definitely. All right, y'all. All things considered, we also wanted to go ahead and get a little bump out to everybody. If you're not aware, we do have a YouTube channel. I don't know how you wouldn't be aware of that already, but we have a couple of things in the works, and I know that Nuno's been working on some major project with the blog in regards to some Saturn emulation. So I figured I'd let everybody chime in on what they might be working on and let y'all kind of get an idea of what to look forward to.
Yeah, so I'm kind of taking a small break from YouTube. Not that I'm not planning, coming back to YouTube and doing more videos. I definitely will in the future do more videos. I love that stuff. I love doing them and sharing them with the community. But right now I'm kind of taking a break to work on something that I've been promising for a long time. It's a long time coming, which is a multi-part, really in-depth series of articles about emulators. So I'm going into emulation in general, what it is about, what it's not, trying to dispel some myths. And then I'm just going to go really in depth into each emulator, what it's all about, what is its history, how does it work. I'll probably even do a guide about setting it up, because sometimes people really have a lot of trouble with setting up emulators, which is understandable. Sometimes it's not an intuitive process, so I'm going to try to help you guys with that.
Okay, I've just dipped my toe in the waters of video making with my first video that went up on the YouTube channel, which was just me talking about how I got into the Saturn and how that video game console had become my favorite ever. Anyway, so I don't know about making my own videos. I did make a strange cameo in one of Sam's videos, so I don't think that's something that don't think that's something that's going to happen again. But if anyone were to offer me a cameo spot in one of theirs, I'd be certainly happy to pop up.
Yeah, on my regards, I've got a little bit of a vacation to work on, and I've got a couple of videos going. I just dropped one my Import Friendly. That's a series we're going to start doing on a regular basis. Probably once a month we'll be dropping one of those out, and that's just concerning, games that people here in the West generally think that they can get the game for cheaper in Japan. And a number of times that's a great idea. Other times not so much a good idea. And if you go watch the video about Burning Rangers, you'll kind of see what I'm getting in regards to that. But on top of that, I've got a review coming up. We've also got 2 games that we're going to kind of take a review look at, but not really a review. It's going to be more of a let's kind of see what this game's all about. But that's kind of what's on the pipes for me.
Yeah, I actually have no idea what I got going on. I'm kind of figuring it out at some point. I have a few things I probably put a little bit of work in, but probably not enough to be able to announce at this time.
All right, gents. All right. Well, if you have somehow trudged the road of Happy Destiny with us and got to this point, and you're still listening, thank you very much, by the way, we figured that we'd go ahead and get to the subject at hand, and that would happen to be a little title we like to talk to and talk about, and we've alluded to multiple times now, Burning Rangers. So, I'm going to hand it over to Brian and let y'all hear his sweet voice that he loves to sing all the time.
I don't know how to respond quite to that. Maybe this is where we cue the theme song. I mean, I think that probably makes sense, right? So
What the hell, man?
Burning Rangers was published by Sega, and it was developed by Sonic Team, which was produced by Yuji Naka and directed by Naoto Oshima. During the waning days of the Saturn. It came out in February 98 in Japan, and May of 98 in North America, and a month later in June in Europe. This was actually, according to Wikipedia, one of the final 5 Saturn games released in North America. And I think, they released Burning Rangers really quietly. They didn't give it a big production run. They kind of just threw it out to market around the same time as Panzer Dragoon Saga as well. And both titles ended up being pretty rare. There wasn't much fanfare or marketing behind them at the time, as Sega had kind of quietly diverted their attention to spinning up everything for ahead of the Dreamcast launch by that point. And in later interviews, I'll talk about the premise here. Yuji Naka, he lamented that so many games were about killing and destroying things, and that Sonic Team really wanted to make a game that was about rescuing people instead. In Burning Rangers, it was a 3D action game where the point was really to run around the levels and fight not necessarily enemies, some enemies, but mostly fires. The whole point is to put out fires with a little proton laser cannon thing you have. And the main objective was to progress through each of the 4 stages, and then there was a boss battle at the end. And along the way, you're tasked with saving a number of civilians who are trapped throughout each level. There's some platforming elements as well. There's a good mix of you have a jetpack, and you get to use your jetpack to double jump and thrust around the stage a little bit. And we'll talk a little more in depth about all of these aspects later on. And then there's an occasional enemy robot or so, but really combat is not a huge part of the game outside of outside of the boss battles, I feel. And additionally, there's a crystal system, I guess, or gem system. And so you need to collect crystals, which were scattered throughout each stage, or you also get them for putting out fires. And you need to use those, like you spend them as currency when you're saving civilians. And they also operate as kind of a damage or health defense system, like similar to how rings work in the Sonic the Hedgehog games. So so the mechanic is, as long as you have at least one crystal on hand, you can get hit, you'll drop it, and you won't die. But if you get hit without a crystal, then you lose a life pretty much. So that's, I guess that's the gist of the premise. And we'll get a little, like I said, we'll get a bit more detailed as we go here. But I think just to start things off, let's talk a little bit about our own personal histories with the game. Like, when did you first play the game, and how did you acquire it?
Well, back in the day when I was still a kid, I never heard about this game, which happened to a lot of games. I mean, a lot of games that nowadays are considered like obvious classics for the Saturn. At the time, I just didn't know they existed. They flew completely past me. But when I kind of got interested in the Saturn again, around the time I first joined the Saturn Junkyard in the late 2000s, I found out about this game. It had a really great reputation. I mean, everyone seems to know and like it. But at the time, for whatever reason, I didn't play it. And actually, this was the first time I played it. It was thanks to you guys convincing me to be a part of this gaming club that I finally sat down and played Burning Rangers, and I quite liked it. So yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, so like Nuno, I didn't hear about this in the 90s when it was released. I first heard of it when a friend of ours who was a correspondent on the Saturn Junkyard, he didn't actually write for the blog, but he had his own blog which was linked to ours. And he told me that he was a massive fan of Burning Rangers and he was happy to give us an article that he'd written about Burning Rangers for us to publish on the Saturn Junkyard, a guy called Jay. So that was my first exposure to it. And he wrote such a glowing review of it that I was curious about the game. And so it was the very first game that I ever imported. I think I bought it from Play Asia. And it was quite expensive, but the PAL copy was expensive back in the mid 2000s as well. So I bought the Japanese copy, which was great. It's a double disc pack. One of the discs is a small mini audio CD of the theme tune, and I put it on in 2007 or 2008, whenever I bought it. I played it for about 15 minutes, had not a clue what was going on. Couldn't make head nor tail of the game, so I put it back on the shelf, and that was that for 10 years. It was only after Simon Gale, who's a blog correspondent and Facebook favourite, we'll get him on here sometime soon. But anyway, Simon Gale bought a copy from the much discussed sex shop for £80, a PAL copy, and he was so enthusiastic about the game that I decided I was going to get my own copy, and that's how I ended up with it. It cost me £80, so it's perhaps the most expensive Saturn game I've ever bought, but it's a mint copy, and I'm really fond of it, really happy that I got it. But that's how I first heard about it. It was about 10 years ago.
My first introduction with the game was probably back around 2002, 2003 or so. I think going back, I heard about the game back in relevancy with the Saturn, at least, the 98, 99 period. But I'd never played it. I never played it at a kiosk. I never played a rental version of it. But a friend of mine that I'd met probably in the early 2000s or so, like I was saying, he had the game, and I was able to play it one time for probably 15, 20 minutes. And to be honest with you, it didn't really catch my fancy. I was getting into more games like first-person shooters, etc., etc., and this was a dated at the time, it felt to me, because I was still in my youth. I was still amazed by the graphics coming out on the Xbox and the PlayStation, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of just really didn't get into it. Fast track a couple of years, and at this point I was rebuilding my Saturn collection, and I was going the disc only route, like I've said 1,000 times before, and I was able to snag a copy of this up pretty local at a local pawn shop, and I got it for we'll say I got it for under $80. We'll just put it that way. I'm not going to make anybody too pissed off at me right now, but I was able to pick up a loose disc of it, and to be honest with you, I might have played another 20 minutes of it, and I was just like, well, this really isn't getting my fancy, because I don't know, I've gone through phases with my game collecting and my gaming, etc. And you know, I've gone through phases where I just wanted to play the Dreamcast or just the Saturn or just the Genesis, whatever the case was. But it wasn't until recently, with the resurrection of this title and everybody getting over it, that, you know, I really wanted to push myself through it. And for the first time since, you know, playing the game, since owning the game, I actually went ahead and beat it. And I went ahead and beat the American version as well as beating the Japanese version. And I highly hated playing the Japanese version because it took me so far out of the immersion level, not understanding what was going on. But yeah, I really enjoy the game today. It's very simplistic, but it's also at the very same time got a lot of nuance to it, and it has a certain charm and a certain character about it. And at this point in my life, where I'm seeking single-player games even more with a narrative of some sort to keep me engaged, I really found it quite enjoyable.
Yeah, it definitely had that signature, unmistakable Sonic Team stamp on it, for sure. And I think I had heard about it, maybe not right when it came out, but, you know, at some point down the line. And as I had mentioned in other podcasts, that I didn't get a Saturn until about the mid-aughts. And I ended up, I think I eventually got Burning Rangers. It was actually in a eBay bundle that I had purchased, I want to say like 7 or 8 years ago. And I don't know how I lucked out, but it was under $200, and it was the console and some controllers and light guns, and it came with about a dozen games, including Panzer Dragoon Saga, and it included my memory is kind of failing me here. I think it had a X-Men Children of the Atom and a couple of other games like that, and then it had a complete copy of Burning Rangers as well, and also what ended up being my second favorite Saturn game of all time, at least as of recently, is Dragon Force. So it came with like all of that stuff, and I think I have a really bad habit of just getting games and then kind of letting my backlog accumulate, and Burning Rangers was one of those casualties of that sensibility of mine. So I actually didn't get around to playing it seriously until we started this a few weeks ago. I think that I was looking for an excuse to really force myself to play it, as you know, other people in the Junkyard had spoke highly of it and had fond memories. So I was really curious to check it out, and so I really wanted to kind of have an excuse to force myself to do it. So yeah, I guess before we go too much further, I do want to throw this out there. We are going to be talking pretty in depth about this game, and I got to imagine at some point we're going to be stumbling across spoiler territory. So I just want to throw that out there, that this cast, I'm going to assume will probably have some spoilers. So if you haven't played the game, you know, you can either do that or come back, or but honestly, like, this story isn't really complex enough, or you know, I don't think there is much to spoil anyway, honestly. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about that from a story perspective, but certainly from some of the things that might like surprise you, or you know, you might really be charmed by in the game. If you want to explore those for yourself, you know, you might play the game first before you hear us ramble on about them. So that brings us to the next segment of this, and Burning Rangers, of course, it centers around a team of futuristic firefighters, and they're inferred as having like a celebrity status. And I guess in this future, there's not really any real problems. Like everything, the biggest problem everybody has is that all these fires keep blazing through all these random places. Like everything seems to be spontaneously combustible. So they have to have a team of crack shot firefighters to come in and save people and whatnot. So and there's two characters. There's that are playable at the outset of the game. It's Sho and Tillis. They're kind of the rookies of the team, and the rest of the team consists of Chris, who's the command center leader, I guess. I wasn't sure if she's like the main head honcho of the group. And then you have like Reed Phoenix. He's the field leader. And then you have Big. I think his name was Big Landman. He's like the grizzled veteran of the team, and he seemingly has like the most celebrity clout, it seems. So those five characters made up the main firefighting team of the Burning Rangers. And this game was presented in fully animated cartoon cutscenes with complete with like a theme song and a lot of voice acting. I was actually pretty surprised at how much voice acting was in this game. And each character, it seemed, was fully voiced, even all of the random civilians that you end up stumbling across and rescuing. So yeah, there was a lot going on, and it seemed like there were a lot of high production values for this game at the time. So I'll turn it over to you guys and really ask, what did you guys think about the presentation as a whole of Burning Rangers, and what do you like most about it, or least, and what worked, what didn't, and why would you say that?
Well, I think this game really has a pretty unique look, and it has really high production values. I mean, no question about that. It has anime-style cutscenes, which I think is really great. I mean, at the time, most cutscenes were CGI, and the computer graphics at the time weren't usually so having. It's like full quality anime style. It's not like trying to make an anime style. No, it's really honest to God actual anime style. It could have been a show on TV. And in terms of the quality of the animation, that's what I'm talking about. You don't get a full show worth of video. But yeah, and the graphics in the actual game, the 3D graphics are just really, really great. I mean, they're amazing. I think it has got to be one of the best looking games on the Saturn period. At least that's what I think about it. Hopefully it doesn't come out as too high of a praise. I think it's not. I think it's fair to say this because it's really a good-looking game. And then there's the audio, and Brian just mentioned the voice acting. There's a lot of dialogue in the game, and that ties into the actual gameplay because you're guided by there's this character that's her role in the story and in the game. It's to guide you through audio communication, and I think it's a gameplay feature, but it's also a presentation feature because you have this constant audio instructions, this audio presence that you just don't get in other games. And overall, I think the whole presentation, the whole aesthetic of the game, it's solid, it's consistent across the whole game, like from the anime cutscenes to the actual gameplay, 3D graphics, it's consistent, and it's really great. It really impressed me.
I'd second everything Nuno said. I agree with it. I guess a reference point would be the Power Rangers. So you've got both genders and a multiracial team there of characters. There are a few stereotypes. The big hulking veteran, for example, but they are classic stereotypes and they work so well. And you could imagine a TV spin-off for this. You could imagine further games. It's a shame that the Dreamcast never got a follow-up to this game. Sonic Team made the game. There is a unique aesthetic to some of the characters. The shoes they wear are very Sonic-like, and some of the bosses that you battle look and act in a similar way to characters and bosses from Knights and from Sonic. So it's amazing. I'll wholeheartedly agree that the animated cutscenes are superb, and there's something that should have been used in so many more Saturn games. I think they give games another dimension that CGI cutscenes just can't give it. The voice acting is excellent, and it is such an integral part of the game that it needs to be. And the soundtrack is absolutely infectious. It gets into your brain. It's actually good. It's something that I'd be happy to listen to away from the game. So, and it's something you'll find yourself humming and singing for days after you've played it. So yeah, absolutely superb on all fronts in terms of the presentation for me. Graphics, overall good. Colors amazing. Sometimes it gets a bit pixelated for me. Obviously that's a sort of something you have to bear if you're a Saturn fan. But overall, I think the graphics are superb. So yeah, actually superb. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have a chance to delve a little bit, in more detail on the visuals as well later on.
Yeah, I've got to echo what everybody else said. Presentation-wise, this game is absolutely amazing. I know me and Nuno both are heavy anime fans, and I absolutely love any game that has anime cutscenes. It's kind of a nostalgia feature to me. It's just a fanboy thing. But kind of what I was getting to in my YouTube video the other day, the immersion that I got from this game, actually being able to be entrenched in the audio communications between the team, actually being able to reach out to a comms officer so that I could try to navigate through the level. The gameplay mechanics themselves, I mean, this game really kept me going, especially whenever I could understand what was actually going on. I didn't really get too far off into like the looking so deep into the character models or the pixelated graphics or anything like that. I really enjoyed the story. It does have a narrative to talk about. I know that some people like to cut the narrative a little bit short, or et cetera, but it does have a narrative. And whenever you understand that narrative, whenever you understand what's going on in the playable character's mind, whether it be Sho or Tillis, you understand why they want to be a Burning Ranger, why they're doing that, and you kind of just take yourself out of the real world for a minute and put yourself into their shoes and get into that mindset. It's really a fun and enjoyable time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys nailed pretty much everything on the head for the main pillars of just how impressive everything was in this game's presentation. It really is just kind of flashy AF. I don't know. Are we swearing on this podcast? I'm not sure.
We try to keep it a little PC. Try to keep it a little PG.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just stick with that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I was just really impressed all around. It just didn't seem like they overlooked any detail as far as what kinds of visual and audio and just tonal nuances that they want to play into to building this boisterous kind of superhero team, like go-getter, like 80s anime style, just a really enthusiastic game, and that was underscored tremendously with its incredibly infectious soundtrack, as you guys have brought up already. I'm not sure if it quite met like the production levels of like kind of the games that went for the Hollywood style, Metal Gear Solid and that kind of thing at the time, but I think for what it tried to do, it's pretty brilliant in that regard. And I think there was also some surprisingly good voice acting for at least some of the characters. I think Tillis and a couple of the other ones were a little bit less but I know the guy who voiced the field leader, Reed. He sounded a lot. I thought he sounded a lot like a character that I'd recognize from the Xbox 360 RPG Lost Odyssey, and Jansen. That was his name. And honestly, he was like one of my favorite RPG characters of all time because he's like kind of a sassy, sarcastic, just I don't know. He's just kind of like a smart ass. And then when I looked on IMDb for this game, sure enough, it was the same voice actor. I think his name is Michael McGahern. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. But the dialogue wasn't really like I'm a little torn. I could go either way because on some level, I loved how the dialogue played into building the atmosphere of the game. And I will probably talk about a couple of examples of that as we go. But it was really cool to hear like him and the other characters kind of chime in throughout the mission. And there was one time I think he was like he was also might have played other characters because I'm pretty sure I heard him with like a fake British accent voicing one of the professors or field staff at the aquarium level, which I thought was kind of funny. So I guess we also reached out to the Facebook community on what some of their favorite memories of the game were. I think we can. I don't know. I'm going to throw this around. I don't know if you guys or throw this out there. I don't know if you guys would buy into it, but I think Yardians is kind of a cool name for our members. I don't know. Maybe that'll stick. Who knows? But anyway, so we just threw this out there to say, hey, we asked what their favorite memories of Burning Rangers were. And I have a few responses here from the threads that was asked in. And the first response is from Cameron Graziano. He's a regular, a very involved member on our forums. And he says that I just got Burning Rangers about a month ago. I've known of the game since Expert Gamer talked about it in the 90s, although the adverts were lame. I still knew about it even from my little town in Canada, but I'd say buying it will be a forever memory, considering the price, the $300 Canadian, or $350 Canadian. I'll also say playing it will forever be memorable. The graphics are great, all things considered, and the controls are odd, but still fun game for me. They fit the time. Our own Leonidas, he chimed in as well, and he's a mod in our Facebook community. He said it's quite a lot of fun. The first great impressions are its great soundtrack, graphics, and the navigation system, while you were directed by the Burning Rangers Central, and that would be Chris. Simon Gale, also a mod, he mentioned that his favorite moment was realizing that he could treat himself. Or no, sorry, he says, favorite moment, realizing I could treat myself and get a copy. But it's a great game from a development team at the peak of its creative powers. The concept of the game appeals to me as it's unique and has a cool backstory. Overall, the gameplay is excellent, and the graphics really push the Saturn to its limits. Almost feel like I need to shovel more coal into my machine as it chugs along with these stunning visuals. It's a game that is fast becoming one of my top 5 on the system, displacing some real stalwarts for me. And wow, yeah, I couldn't really agree more with that sentiment. And I think we'll have a chance to discuss some of these aspects as well. And kind of sum up our own thoughts of the game as we go along, or as we wind down and summarize our thoughts on the game. So, did you guys thinking about like specific memories though? Was there anything that popped out to you that you would describe as like your favorite particular memory of Burning Rangers?
Well, there was this moment in the last mission. Actually, now I don't know if it was last or the second to last, but anyway, it doesn't matter. You might consider this a spoiler, so if you guys listening in to this want to keep your experience absolutely fresh, you might want to skip ahead a minute or two. But there was this moment when you're... first of all, I have to explain how you rescue people. So you're a firefighter, you rescue people. But usually you have these power crystals that you collect. You use them to teleport the people outside of the building. So you find a person, you approach them, and you instantly teleport them out. You don't interact further with them. You just keep on with your mission. And in one of the last missions, and I think it was the actual last mission, there's this kid that there's some kind of interference and you can't teleport him out. So you actually have to carry him. And in this moment, it was, of all the game, I think it was the moment that I most felt like an actual firefighter. And I felt like I finally had a connection with one of the people that I was saving, because you have to carry this kid. While you carry him, you can't shoot your gun. So you kind of feel a bit defenseless. And you have to carry him out. And when you finally get to an escape pod, there's only one place there's only seat for one in the escape pod, and you obviously give the seat to the kid, and you're left behind. You voluntarily stay behind to save the kid. And it was, of the whole game and the whole story, it was the moment that kind of touched me the most. I mean, it's not absolutely heart-wrenching or anything like that, but it was this moment that really, I think, really spoke to me at some level.
Can I just say, I think that's absolutely beautiful, Nuno. That's truly beautiful. It didn't actually get me on such an emotional level as that. I think for me, the best memory was that back in 2017, not so long ago, was getting my PAL copy, and I bought it from Sex. I bought it. You can either buy them in mint condition, or you can buy them what they describe as boxed, and you have no idea what sort of state your game is going to arrive in. It arrived in perfect condition. I put it into the Saturn, and hearing the theme tune in English, first of all, was absolutely superb. But then hearing the direction for the you have a tutorial at the start, which in the Japanese import copy is so hard to understand, and it goes on and on and on, and you're being sort of spoken to in a language you don't understand, and it sort of killed the experience for me, because I just didn't know what I was doing, and there is so much of a voice element to this game, so to hear the instructions in English, and to know what I was doing, and to the optimism I felt that I was going to be playing this game and that I would be guided through it by Chris, and so that was my favourite memory. There you go.
Yeah, I don't really know what you'd call favorite memory of it. I can't really say that there was any particular part. I take that back. Towards the end of the game, this is completely spoiler. Towards the end of the game, it's not the very last mission, but it's the next to last mission. Playing as Sho, whenever you go to save the little boy and you put him off in the escape pod, and they send him off, and you have that little flashback of Sho, whenever a Burning Ranger had saved him. That really got to me, because little back history on me. We didn't come up in the greatest times. We were pretty well as borderline poverty, if not poverty, a lot of the time. And we also had a lot of instances with family going on and everything. And that there was one time in particular where our home had gotten flooded, and we had a whole bunch of dogs, little puppies and everything like that. And I had to, as a 7-8-year-old kid, climb up underneath my house and try to save these puppies before they drowned. And I can remember there was a local sheriff's deputy who had come up with me, and he was trying to help me get these dogs out, and he was too big to fit underneath there, but he would throw his coat, and I'd put the puppy on there, and he'd pull the puppy out, and it kind of brought me back and kind of reminded me of that whenever there was, because when I was a kid, I always looked up to firefighters, police officers, and stuff like that. And that for a minute there, it kind of took me back to a better time, if you want to say it like that.
God damn it, you guys! I'm weeping now. No, I didn't really think about that as we were going through, or as I was playing the game. But seriously, now that the way you guys describe it, Holy shit. Yeah, that I mean, it really is a pretty impactful moment for the build up, and especially if you can relate to that little boy. That's pretty awesome. This is also another spoiler that I'll probably get into here. I think overall, it's like a lot of the details, a lot of the peripheral elements and details that just help build up the atmosphere of the game, including a lot of the visual and audio cues. I just was really impressed by. Survivors having them, and their stories and their unique things, especially that little boy. I mean, they all have like these these unique dialogue and personalities, even if they're not all super fleshed out. It's kind of nice when you save some of them, or a lot of them, they will send you emails after you saved them, and so when you back out to the main menu, you can open those emails and read a little bit more about what they were going through and their situations, and it kind of helps, at least on the back end, add some more backstory to those, and it helps make the stakes feel maybe a little bit weightier than they otherwise would have been without those small details. I will also say the comm system banter between the team members, that was like a huge memory for me. I mean, or at least one of my favorites. It kind of added a brilliant layer of urgency and scale to the game's atmosphere. And it made the game feel like there's just more happening in the mission and that scope of the situation, that it's like greater than just what your player character can see or that you have agency over. And I love in general when games embellish this notion that there's more going on in the game setting than you directly have control over. And I thought Burning Rangers just did it really well through how it sparingly used the peripheral team dialogue throughout missions. And for example, and this is a specific spoiler a bit here, you spend most of your time exploring in the second level this underwater laboratory, and then there's like details about this situation that are revealed through the comm chatter. And there's like a entire aquatic park, it turns out, that's above you. There's like a lab part that you're exploring, and then there's also like a public aquatic center or something. And then when the fires and disasters start up, it's originally, everybody assumes that the park was closed that day, and it's just supposed to be maintenance staff who will be, trapped up there. So it's just going to be a few people that you have to save. But then you later learn that through the regular updates throughout the mission that there's actually I think it was like a school or something visiting for a field trip. And so it turns out there were actually hundreds of children trapped in the facility. And so, that kind of moment really added those layers of detail that really helped make what I was doing, feel a little bit more important or feel a little bit more urgent. And I just loved how that all was executed in this game. So yeah, that's about all I have for that. And so we can shift over a bit more to the other core elements of the gameplay and visuals and the stage design. And from a technical perspective, I mean, there's no doubt that Burning Rangers was just a super ambitious game in all of these areas. And for the visuals, considering that the Saturn's architecture made it really challenging to fully develop or to get really good visual quality out of 3D titles, at least relative to the other 3D platforms at the time. I feel Burning Rangers managed to be one of the most visually stunning 3D titles for this console. There was just, everything was rendered in full 3D, and there were a lot of vibrant and impressive lighting and special effects and everything. But you could obviously feel that Sonic Team maybe made some concessions here and there, especially considering the equally ambitious the stage design and the environment or the gameplay mechanics. And for the gameplay, like as a futuristic firefighter, it makes sense that your character's nimble. So you're equipped with a jetpack and you get to dodge and double jump and dart in different directions, as well as the photon cannon that you use to to fight the enemies and extinguish the fires. But there was a lot of different like platforming and different ways of traversing stages, like with the anti-gravity sections and swimming sections and running around. There's just a lot of ground to cover. So all of that said, it's pretty clear the visuals and gameplay and stage designs were all pretty ambitious, and maybe to a fault. And you could maybe see how Sonic Team needed to make some trade-offs between those elements. So do you guys feel that Burning Rangers achieved a good balance between those aspects? And what do you think worked the best, and what maybe didn't work quite as well?
Well, I think the graphics really are amazing. And if you guys listening have watched my video titled Saturn Games in HD, where I go over a lot of games that I show a lot of games being played on called Pause, which does higher resolution rendering, which means you can basically play the games in whatever resolution you choose. And some games scale better than others, because some games in higher resolutions just look a bit like crap, or they look inconsistent across the overall looks of the game. But Burning Rangers, there's a reason why it was both the very first game in that video, and why it's the game that I chose for the thumbnail video. And it's also no coincidence that I made that video once I started playing Burning Rangers, because I think this game scales so beautifully in higher resolution. There's a lot of reasons why I don't usually use that emulator, because it doesn't have much compatibility, and it has a lot of inconveniences that makes me not want to play much on it. But Burning Rangers, I played the whole game through on that emulator. I had never done that before with any other game. I'm probably not going to do that a lot in the future. But I did it for Burning Rangers because once I saw how the game looked in HD, in my case I was playing at 1080p, once I looked at how beautiful it looks, it's just amazing. I mean, it's words don't do it justice. I mean, if you want to look what this game looks like in HD, just go watch that, because it's really beautiful. And I just can't see myself playing it on real hardware or on any other kind of emulator that only does the actual Saturn resolution, because it looks just so much better. Having said that, I do think that it was an ambitious game, as Brian mentioned. And there are some things that I think didn't work quite as well as they could have. I mean, for the Saturn, I think it really pushed the limits, and they couldn't have made much more than what they did with the final release. But I think it was a game that tried to see if you know what I'm getting at with this. I think it was a game that was held back by the Saturn hardware, both in terms of raw power, because the game would have looked so much better on something like, I don't know, the Dreamcast. But also in terms of controls, and that's my biggest gripe with this game. Out of all the things, I struggle with the controls, and particularly with the camera. I had to fight the camera. I felt that I was fighting the camera a lot of times, instead of playing with it, instead of it helping me play the game, it was working against me. And for me, that's the game's biggest flaw. And it also kind of had to do with the Saturn gamepad. I mean, I know it supports the analog, the 3D controller, but that's still only one analog stick for controlling the character. And I think this game would have been so much better with a second analog stick to control the camera.
Amen to that.
For me, I'm slightly hampered by being perhaps the least able gamer here. And for me, the game isn't always linear. I found myself getting lost a couple of times, and I second what Nuno says about the camera. It wasn't always my friend in the game. So the levels can be pretty long, and there can be quite a lot to do during each mission. So that getting lost is not something that adds in any way to the game, because it takes long enough to play, especially if you don't achieve the mission. You have to replay the whole level again. So yeah, for me, that I guess that's what it be. It's not linear enough. I need a game that takes me on a path, and I don't always feel that it was obvious where to go, what to do. So even with the direction, because in the later levels you lose your assistant, the Chris, who guides you through the first missions and tells you which directions to go and so on. She isn't there in the later missions for reasons you'll find out if you play the game. So yeah, that will be it for me. I got lost.
Yeah, you got
Thank
lost.
you, Sam.
You got lost a lot, man.
Thank you for laughing at my poor skills.
No, it's awesome because your little cameo in my video was perfect. It echoed it perfectly.
He actually went Super Saiyan.
little bit of background detail for y'all. I had actually made it to where he had the whole Super Saiyan glow and everything else going on, but this video took me like 2 weeks to create because of a number of technical issues that occurred in the process, and I lost that, and I got so fed up with it I didn't try it again. So I sincerely apologize for not having Simon's hair glowing. But the gameplay itself, yeah, I'm gonna echo the dual thumbstick issue. That is one thing I wish Sega had figured out, especially whenever it came to the Dreamcast. They should have figured it out by that point. The double analog scheme works. It works for first-person shooters. It works for third-person shooters. But if y'all remember, back then, even first-person shooters hadn't got it down whenever it came to what stick did what and what axis did what. I can remember the sticks being completely just idiotic compared to what they are now. All that being said, I prefer playing Burning Rangers on the regular pad, whether it be the North American or the Japanese. It doesn't matter to me. I can use both of them. There's trade-offs of both. But my main issue was, and I think it's a learning hurdle a lot of people don't seem to understand, is utilizing the camera, the ability to swap the camera, 90 degrees in any direction, and not trying to, because if you really play the game feels really slippery. I think that's one way to explain it. Whenever you're moving around, you don't come to a stop very quickly. The ability for you to actually move, it's like either the first step or two, you're moving slowly, and then you're just sprinting, and it's really hard to control your character whenever you're constantly dealing with platforming, because it is a 3D platformer. You got all those issues on top of the fact you got these fires that pop out of nowhere with your audio cues that you got to backtrack out of the way. But if you try to slow down a little bit and utilize the camera to do the turning for you, because if you just stop on a dime, let the camera turn, and then start going forward, your character just like automatically goes forward. You'll do the turn properly. Especially in the later levels where the platforming became a lot more precise. I really found that to be enjoyable, to actually get over that hurdle and start kind of figuring out how this game wanted to play. Graphics wise, I understand that Sonic Team was trying their best to push the hardware, and by all means they did. They pushed the hardware. They pushed it to a point where I think they pushed it past what the Saturn could actually do, even for people who are well aware of how to program for the Saturn in the later stages of its life. Because if you'll notice, the clipping in between areas of the level, the character clipping, the fact that the fire models, everything else going on like that, you really see all these imperfections of what's going on. Taking that with a grain of salt and understanding what you're dealing with and understanding what the Saturn was originally intended to do, it blows my mind to this day that they were able to do all that. I absolutely enjoyed the game. I really got into it. I loved it. And I think that the trade-offs, everything with the stage layouts, the aesthetics, character designs, all that, I think it plays well if you're able to kind of take a step back, appreciate what it is, and then try to understand how the game plays. Not how you want it to play, but how it actually plays.
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much just said everything I would have said, so I don't really have much else to add. Although I will second the preference for having the digital for using the D-pad for more precise platforming moments, particularly another spoiler at the end or on the towards the end of the last level where you're climbing up a bunch of suspended pillars and platforms to try to above like a big, I don't know, it's just a big lava pit basically, and you have to climb, and it takes like several minutes to get to the very top. And if you fall, you have to start all over again. So yeah, what I ended up actually doing for that stage is just I still use a 3D pad, but I just switched it to D-pad mode for just that specific segment or section of the game. So let's talk about the challenge a little bit as well. I mean, the game was pretty brief. It was only 4 levels. And I think Sonic Team succeeded in making Burning Rangers a pretty challenging game, despite the fact that it was not the longest game, perhaps. And tapping into that urgency and stress that you'd imagine a futuristic firefighter might deal with. There were a lot of things there were always a lot of different things that I felt could go wrong at any time during the level, which you would often see compound on top of each other for a particularly stressful experience, including random explosions, and then the annoyances of the crystal system, where you lose them if you get hit, and I felt like they maybe disappear way too fast before you can collect most of them again. The increasing the limit percentage, which was kind of a proxy for a time limit, I guess. And then once it gets up to 100, everything starts exploding all around you, and you have to just constantly keep moving to not die. And then the boss encounters, and also as Simon said, getting lost because there's the maze-like map layouts there that were not super linear, and just the difficulty of the controls and everything that you guys mentioned. Are there any other things or anything in particular, if you didn't mention it already, that you did find stressful about the game? And do you feel like it hurt the experience, or maybe played into that sense of urgency even more?
Yeah, so the game kind of gets a bit hard, a bit quick. It's not the hardest game ever, but the first level starts off so easy that I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. I mean, I've heard about people having trouble with this game. It seems so bad. And then, wow, it gets challenging, let's say. But having said that, I think it absolutely nails the stress and the urgency and the uncertainty of being a firefighter. Not that I am a firefighter, I have no real life experience, but just speaking of what we all imagine it to be, I think this game really gets it, really transmits to you, to the player, all of these things that we think about when we think about firefighting. There's the time limit. I mean, it's not a hard time limit, as Brian explained. It's more of the situation is getting worse, and the building, the structure where you're in is constantly on the brink of getting worse, like as if the fires are spreading and whatever is happening is getting worse, and it's all about to collapse. You have that pressure, and there's the confusion about not knowing where to go next. You constantly have to listen to your comms, to the character that's guiding you, which I think is just an awesome gameplay feature, by the way. I think it's really an interesting idea, and it was well executed. yeah, there's the time limit. Okay, it's not really a time limit, but there's this pressure of the situation constantly getting worse. There's the confusion of not knowing the layout of the area and constantly having the like multiple choices. There's 3 or 4 doors. In which door should I go? Sometimes your what should I call the well, the character is not named Chris, but anyway, you have the Chris. Sometimes she tells you where you should go. Other times you're kind of left on your own to explore. You're kind of uncertain where to go next, and there's all these random explosions that happen all the time. You have to constantly be on your toes. Sometimes I kind of let my guard down, thinking that I was backtracking like a corridor that I had already traversed, and I thought, well, it's all right. I already went through this area once, and then boom, like explosions everywhere. They don't actually. They have a sound cue, but so you always know when an explosion is going to happen. It's not like out of the blue, but you have a very limited time window to react. So you have to constantly be on your toes. And the missions kind of get long, and I think this adds to the difficulty of the game, because the missions can be a bit long, and so you have a lot to lose. You have a lot of progress, a lot of time invested to lose, and because it's a fast-paced game, time kind of stretches. If you actually time the missions, I don't know, I have no idea how long the average mission lasts, but it seems like a long time because you're constantly fighting the situation, and I think it's a stressful game. It's definitely not a game to play when you just want to relax and wind down. It's a stressful game. It's a challenging game. You have to be in the right kind of mindset for it, but if you are, I think it's all about the premise. What's this game about? It's about being a firefighter in the future, and the gameplay really conveys that you're a firefighter and you're fighting the like, you're not fighting an enemy, although there are enemies, but mostly of all you're fighting the situation. You're fighting the building itself, and it really nails it down.
Okay, where do I start? I've got a list of about 1,000 points. This game did stress me out, and it has stressed me out, and it is currently stressing me out because I'm the only one of us here that hasn't completed the game. I'm stuck on mission 4, the last mission of the game, which is very long and seems to have a lot of hoops to jump through. No pun intended, as it's a Sonic Team game. Basically, the other day, this will put it into perspective. Last Sunday, when Sam and I were getting ready to do the Guardian Heroes live stream, Sam called me up, and as he called, I said, "Sam, I think I'm just about to finish the game." And what had happened was I'd got to the part on mission 4 that the anime cutscene cuts in, and I thought I'd completed the game. Oh no, how wrong I was. There's a whole host of things to do beyond this cutscene, and my soul was crushed a little bit. Today, when I was desperately trying to complete the game in preparation for this podcast, it was stressing me out. I felt it got to the point where it wasn't fun anymore, and this has happened a few times with a couple of Resident Evil games, Code Veronica, and Resident Evil 5, when I was trying to kill Wesker at the very, very, very end of the game. It's just got to the point now where it's feeling like a bit of a chore. I keep thinking, what other games could I be playing right now that I would be enjoying more? And it's a shame because I've enjoyed so many aspects and so many elements of the game, and I wanted to. I mean, as I say, I spent £80 on it, so I really wanted to enjoy this game, and I wanted to complete it, and I want to feel like it's something that I've experienced every aspect of. But at the moment, it's getting to be a chore. There's a bit that people have spoken about and alluded to, where you have to climb up a series of platforms, and if you jump a little too far, or if you veer off when you're walking, this is the bit that Brian says he swaps the controls for. If you fall off that, you can die so mercilessly, or which is almost as bad. You land on a platform and you're able to inch your way back up again. And for me, this is taking ages. I get really anxious about walking along a thin ledge as a video game character. It's something that I don't enjoy. So I find myself inching, or should I say, millimetering along the ledge. Sort of, man. I don't know. There are so many frustrating aspects of it. I wish the level wasn't so long. I wish there weren't so many challenges to Mission 4, and that might just be me as a bad gamer. But I don't know. So I'm hoping that I can sustain my interest in the game beyond this podcast to finish it. But and also, I mean, I guess one of the reasons I may not have finished it is because I had several hours playing golf last week when I should have been trying to finish this. But I've played it at least one night every night this week. I've played it at least one time, and I'm still no further on than I was last Sunday. So, yeah, a few frustrations for me. It'll be a joyous day when I do complete it, and believe me, everyone's going to know about it.
Looking forward to it.
No, for me, I think the most stressful part, and Simon kind of alluded to it, and when I was talking about the controls, this was the only way I could get, because I was getting to the point like Simon, I was getting to a point where I was getting so frustrated, because at the same time I was trying to play I'd play the Japanese version first, so it was fresh in my mind, and then I would play the English version. Now that was because of the video I was doing, an import friendly video. Playing the Japanese just got me so stressed out that by the point I was playing the US copy, I wasn't really enjoying the game. On top of the fact I was trying my best to figure out these slippery controls. The fire wasn't that big an issue. What the problem was that I wasn't stopping and going where I wanted to when I wanted to go. And that's why I was talking about I had to figure out how this game works. It's not as tight as a lot of other games. So when I just took a step back, and this was after the video was done, which was like last Tuesday, well, after I was done recording all the gameplay footage, I sat down, and I think it was Thursday. Of course, I had already beaten both games, but I sat down, and for about, I think it took me like 4 hours to actually, and when I say 4 hours, what I mean is I was sitting down, playing a level, and then going and doing something for a minute, coming back, playing a level, going back, playing a level, like that. And I thoroughly enjoyed the game. I thoroughly enjoyed it if I took my time. It's a fast-paced game. It doesn't take very long to get through, or you can take it slow and steady. I mean, your score is not going to be that best. But I mean, once I just kind of detached myself from it and took it piece by piece, started getting my hands back on the controls, I really didn't find it, that big an issue. I mean, it's like a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people always talk about the multiple boss aspects of the last level. I took the bosses out in no time at all. I mean, it takes like 4 or 5 charged hits on both of them to kill them. The bosses aren't that big an issue once you figure out how the game plays. Once you figure out how to play the game. I don't mean just pick up the pad and start playing, because I tried to do that and I sucked horribly, and I was irritated beyond reason, probably going through the exact same thing Simon was going through, and I finally just had to stop and get into it. And I'll be honest with you, I even watched somebody else play a YouTube playthrough of it and tried to figure out what were they doing and try to mimic them, and the only way I could do that was by slow and steady. That was it. So I mean, frustrating or not, it wasn't that difficult.
I think you guys pretty much covered most of that. I agree, especially like I guess one other thing I would add is the moments where you're the warning sound, that whistle chime comes in, and then you have to avoid the flame. Sometimes I was already holding the direction pad because I was running, and then I feel like it didn't register when I would, because you're supposed to hold down for it to do a backflip. But sometimes I think I would either have too smooth of a motion going from whatever direction I was going to back that it never registered as a button press. And that was kind of frustrating. There were a lot of moments where I felt like it should have let me jump backwards when it didn't. But otherwise, just in general, did anybody else get the impression that Chris was trolling you? Like,
no.
Like,
look, man, hold up. Look. She is not trolling you, but whenever your commands, whenever the only responses this is just an issue of the time with how much space and how much thought was going into it. Up, down, straight, left, right. And whenever you're in a 3D world, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes you hit the button to try to get the voice command, and then you'll turn. She's going to... I had to look this up. Because I was getting so irritated with it. The voice commands are based on your direction on the gameplay area inside of the actual level at the moment you press that button. So if you move whatsoever from the time you hit that button, and you know, just like anyone else who plays the game, just because you hit the button, there's about a half a second until she says something. Well, if you do a 90-degree turn on on the heel of your toes and you're getting ready to jump, it's not going to be the same direction as whenever you hit the button. So I found that the best way to get the best results from utilizing that mechanic was stop moving, press the button, wait to hear what she had to say.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're right, but I don't know. I feel like part of this is not necessarily the technical aspect of it or any sort of like inaccuracies due to that. I'm just like thinking in terms of like how funny would it be if it turns out, okay, well, think about this. Like you're the rookie character, right? And so you're like, as far as I know, the only thing you've accomplished with this team is completing a tutorial level, right? A brief tutorial level. And now you're like being thrust into these situations where you have to fight all the fires and do all of like rescue all the people. And you're like the one person on the team who has to fight the bosses. Like you're like this rookie and it's like, oh, we'll make them fight the boss. And I always like kind of have thought in the back of my mind that it's like, well, what if the team, like, what if the veterans on the team, like Chris and Big Landman and Reed, what if they were just like, I don't know, what if they were just like sitting back and just pretending to be productive? Like, because you don't see them in the missions, you just see, or at least most of the time you don't. They're like, chiming in by the comm system. So they're all like talking about, oh, I'm saving this person, or I'm doing these, heroic things. I'm going to save 2 people at once and whatever. But like, meanwhile, they're just, sipping scotch and smoking cigars in the command center while like the rookies are the ones who are like doing all the work. That's kind of the way I've interpreted the situation. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, man, it's basically Metal Gear Solid 2, right? It's a big and complex training mission, and you're being trolled by everyone. It's like it's virtual reality, man. It's a dream. It's not real.
Yeah, right. Anyway, yeah. So I think that is about all. I mean, that's all. So yeah, I mean that was a pretty long section, it seems, because there were certainly a lot of different challenge or aspects contributing to the challenge of this game. We also posed that question out to the community, and so we asked them, what did you find most stressful about the game? And Peter Naylor said the frame rate, pretty concise. Our own John Lee, he said that the crystals are a pain in the chalk, although he didn't say chalk. And then another reply, he also adds that this is a Sonic Team trademark. The camera, it's a dick. And it's nice that the sound alerts me when fires are about to explode. But the camera is so close in, I can't see where from, and invariably jump into the fiery bastard. And I think I kind of ran across that a little bit too. And Cameron chimes in again, and he says, I'd say as amazing as the backflip can be, it can put you right into harm's way, out of the frying pan into the fryer kind of thing. Also, the Also, the double jump can be frustrating. However, all in all, still love this game. And finally, Joseph Bastardo says, I found the gem system to be extremely frustrating to my perfectionist nature. One wrong step and they're basically all gone. Yeah, I totally agree with that one as well. So I guess at this point we can kind of conclude a little bit with our overall thoughts. And as we work towards concluding this episode, we also threw out to the community a question asking what their overall thoughts were. And Leonidas, again, he says, definitely worth an HD remake and a sequel. Simon Gale said, great game, innovative in terms of story and spectacular in terms of graphics on the Saturn. I think it would have been cool, or it would have made a cool anime series too. Chris Brown chimed in and he said, a brilliant game, although sometimes I wish they saved it for the Dreamcast launch. By the time I bought it, the Saturn was pretty much gone. Wish I bought all of them in the shop now. Yeah, don't we all? And Aaron Redding says, I often wonder why this wasn't ported to the Dreamcast, as well as a load of other Saturn games. I think we can maybe spend an entire episode talking about the challenges of the architecture differences that probably may have resulted in why we didn't see a lot of Saturn games ported over to the Dreamcast. And then finally, Joseph says again, continuing from his other response, that the controls were what I'd expect from the era. I feel like the final level started to introduce some very interesting ideas, like the vertical platforming, co-op with an NPC, tube racing, cool alien creatures, and a fun final boss. It really makes me wish they'd waited and released it on the Dreamcast with way more levels and tightened game engine. Definitely has a great style, music, and charm, but I can't help but feel the game suffers from being rushed out at the end of the Saturn's life. The presentation is on point, though. The theme song is effing ace. And finally, Adam Miller contributed. He said, an absolute gem. I adore it. I'm glad that they have the random layouts each time and the survivor list to add to the content. It makes me want to replay it a lot. Of course, I would have preferred if the game had longer development and had more levels, but it is what it is. I still love it. I just hope Sega returns to this series eventually. And I don't know if any of us really covered the randomness. After you beat the game, the levels will generate randomly.
Level generation.
Yeah. I don't know. I actually didn't play too much. I think once I beat Show, I just went over to Tillis, so I don't think I've experienced that quite yet.
Dude, it sucks. It absolutely... No, let me rephrase that. It doesn't suck if you can understand the navigation controls, and that's why I had to figure out how the navigation controls worked. Mm-hmm. But in the Japanese, there's the portion on the first level, and I only went through the first level with the randomized level generation. There's the point in the first level where you go to the second point of the power being knocked out, and you have to find the switch to turn the power back on. Whenever I was playing the American version, and just by the way, your saves can interchange between regions if you play on the same console. I didn't know that until this game. I talked about that a couple weeks back. But without having the navigation through Chris talking to you, I literally spent the better part of like 9 minutes running around in circles trying to find that switch, because it was that whole area was completely different than whenever I first went through it.
And to wrap this up a bit, what are your guys' overall thoughts on the game? And how would you feel it fits into the legacy of Sonic Team's projects and of Sega's catalog as a whole?
Well, there's something that I haven't mentioned, and it was interesting that you said in the beginning how the creator of the game had the explicit purpose of making a game that wasn't about killing people. And I didn't know that, but it makes perfect sense because, excuse me, I really got that vibe that it feels so much different from most other games, because if you think about it, well, maybe as I'm getting older, I'm getting softer, I don't know. But lately, I've been thinking about this. How, if you look at most games out there, aside from like stuff like puzzle games or walking simulators, as they're sometimes called, most games are always about destroying some enemy, destroying some threat. And it's either aliens or robots, or most of the time it's people. And I'm not going to preach anything, pacifism or something like that, but it kind of you get to a point where it's kind of overbearing, It's like every game is about violence, every game is about killing people. It obviously it's a valid choice, and there's a place for games like that. I mean, I loved the last Doom, the Doom remake. It's not a remake, it's just the new Doom, where it's ultra violent and you're killing demons and there's blood everywhere, and it's a really fun game. I love games like that, but there's also a place for games that are not like that, for games where, just like in this game, in Burning Rangers, most of the times you're not fighting enemies. There are enemies, mostly robots, kind of defense robots that go rogue as the buildings or whatever structure you're in kind of starts collapsing and goes into an emergency state. But most of the time you're not fighting like a being, you're fighting a situation. You're fighting an element, a natural element, which is fire, but also another natural, I wouldn't call it an element, but another natural thing of the natural world, which is time. You're constantly in a hurry and you're saving people. And I think the game does that. Well, this has to do with how you look at it and how the game connects to you. Maybe some people will think the game can be a bit cheesy or a bit simplistic in the way it does that. But for me, I felt that the game is very earnest, is very honest about it, about the way that you save people. Like, I don't think it's corny. I don't think it's cheesy, the way that you go around saving people. I really felt that. I don't know how to explain it. It's one of those moments where my grasp of the English language really fails me. But I think the concept was great and the execution was great. And it was just awesome going around saving people.
I have to say I've got mixed feelings about it. It definitely fits into Sega's legacy because it's a quirky game, and it fits into the Sonic team thing because of the fact that it is a childlike game, if you like. I'll reference again the Power Rangers. You don't want that sort of thing to have violence in it. I absolutely agree with Nuno that there is such a place in this world for games which aren't about killing and I don't know. For me, I think just I've loved so many aspects of it, and it's a game that I feel I've really experienced, which is one of the problems with some of my Saturn experiences. I've got so many games that it's got to be a good experience, or there's something else calling me from my shelf that I'm going to want to play. So I don't know. I'm inconclusive at the moment. If it gets to the point where I complete Mission 4, I'll probably describe it as the best game I've ever played. But right now, I've got mixed feelings about it.
I thoroughly enjoyed the game. I personally don't. I don't see it. If it didn't say Sonic Team, I wouldn't even know it was Sonic Team. That's the way I feel about it. To me, it just feels like a 3D platformer. It's got an interesting story to it. It keeps your attention, and it's challenging at times, most certainly. But again, I don't really feel like it even. To me, it doesn't feel like a Sonic Team game. Primarily, probably because of the fact that most of my experiences with Sonic Team games are Sonic. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I could see the similarities between maybe later on Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 on the Dreamcast. I personally think that this game would have been much more suited on the Dreamcast, hardware wise, etc., etc. I think it's more of a niche title. and that's probably got a lot to do with the price this game demands right now. And for people, nowadays we have a resurgence in mod chips and abilities to play backups. A lot more people, all that on top of emulation. So there are a lot of people who are actually getting to play this game for the very first time, and that's doing great deals for publicity of it. And I think that will help invigorate the memory of it, at least in regards to Sega. But honestly, whenever we were talking earlier about, where does this fit in, where does it fit in with us? When did we first play it? A lot of people probably have never even seen this title. It was a late release, didn't have a lot of traction, and I think only now or in the last couple of years has it really picked up the fan base that it now has. With all that being said, I hope that later on in the history of retro gaming collecting, we'll look at it as a fond memory and not just a fad that went in passing. But other than that, I really can't see where it has. And don't crucify me for this, but it's not really a game that I think deserves the asking price it has on it. And I think it's really a game that people should play however they possibly can and enjoy it for what it is.
I felt Burning Rangers, it was eventually a game that it grew on me after a while, although it did take a little while. And when it did, it grew on me a lot more than I ever expected it to. In many ways, I feel it was a game that was it was well ahead of its time, certainly in terms of presentation and just the ambition of its. In many ways, I feel like Burning Rangers was pretty ahead of its time, especially in presentation, and it in many ways also felt like a victim of its own ambition with some of the technical and the gameplay trade-offs it had to make. But at the end of the day, I feel it's that ambition or the risks it took in the first place that really drew me in so much. And there are so many games that, I would criticize, especially these days, for just playing things too safe. And I really can't say that about Burning Rangers at all. And speaking more broadly and kind of forgive me if I venture into the hyperbolic here. But one of the things I appreciated most about this game is that it was like it represented a key moment where Sonic Team, they zagged when everyone else was expecting them to zig, more or less. I mean, fans throughout the whole Saturn life cycle, fans were clamoring for another mainline Sonic game. And they were always bugging Sonic Team for it, I'm sure. And, many people, even to this day, attribute the failure of the system, at least in the West and PAL, or the North American and PAL territories, because it lacked a proper Sonic game. But, you could really tell that Yuji Naka and everybody had greater and more creative ambitions in mind. And they were definitely willing to go all in to take the risks to realize those ambitions, even if they didn't pay off necessarily or particularly commercially. And with Knights, their other flagship Saturn title, and especially with Burning Rangers, I feel Sonic Team, they outright rejected those calls to just rehash the past and fall back on the Sonic formula that worked for them before. And that's also one of the reasons I have such deep respect for Sonic Team as a developer of that era. And more broadly, that penchant for risk and innovation over that fiscal safety, I guess, that playing it safe mentality is a defining trait of Sega in general and their body of work during particularly the Saturn and the Dreamcast era. And that's likely a chief reason I have such an affinity towards Sega to begin with, and such an enduring enthusiasm for their body of work. And in many ways, Burning Rangers pretty much sums all of that up into one single game. So that pretty much concludes the Burning Rangers Game Club portion of this cast. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts or if we should turn it over to you, Sam, to close us out.
I take it that everybody's done had their fair share of talking. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your time. I know everybody here at the TitanCast crew does as well. We would like to go ahead and fill in the gaps. This is where we do all our plugs and such, everything like that. So if you haven't gotten in touch with us yet, you can find us at Facebook. Well, we have a number of Facebook things, but you just type in the search bar, The Saturn Junkyard, and you will find our page. Type in Saturn Junkyard, no the, and you'll find the group. You can also find us on YouTube. We don't have our own URL yet. We can make that happen if people will subscribe to us. I'm not begging, I'm just saying. But you can throw that up on there. You can find us just by searching The Saturn Junkyard. You'll find us easily, I promise you. We also have a blog spot, which now has its own custom URL, www. Well, no one does that anymore, but still. It's thesaturnjunkyard.com. You will find us, I promise you. That's our blog. We also have, if you're not, I don't know how you're listening to this, but if for some reason you're listening to this, but you have not figured out how to listen to it, you can find this on our Buzzsprout at thesaturnjunkyard.buzzsprout.com. You can also find us on iTunes and on Google Play. So for everybody here at the TitanCast, this is the Southern Sega Gentleman. This is us signing off.